Hi there, my name is Gord Baird. I'm one half of EcoSense. The other half, the better half, is actually sitting over here and with the red hair. With sustainable building, I tie sustainable building in very much with an interconnected lifestyle to it. I don't think you can treat one or the other. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story about who I am and my wife and what EcoSense is, just from our history a little bit. 5 years ago, Ann and I were just two regular people, and we built a sustainable house not very far away here up in the Highlands. We met 5 years ago. 3 months after meeting, we were engaged. 3 months after that, we were married. That's pretty regular. And what adds to that is that I had to steal her away from one of the Gulf Islands. So she moved over here, and she became stepmom to my two kids, Parker and Emily over here, which are our kids now. And we moved into a 27-foot used trailer where we started to embark on building the most sustainable house that we could within what the building code would allow. And just to outdo me, she decided to bring her parents along from Port Moody, who moved into another trailer parked right in front of us. What we define sustainable building as, for our perspective, is that a sustainable building has to work the way nature works. It has to be net zero energy, it has to be net zero water, and there has to be zero waste. There is no waste in nature. And you have to design it so that the house functions as part of the wider ecosystem. We're not different than the rest of the ecosystem, and if we think we are, it's arrogance on our part. And we wanted to build a house where we were directly connected with the surrounding environment, where the inhabitants were part of the ecosystem, where resources and water and energy flowed between the house and the inhabitants and the gardens and the surrounding ecosystem. And so that interconnectedness basically is what drove us. And we found very quickly, living in the trailer, that the plastics and the vinyls that we lived in, that it was not a place where we felt we were working with nature. When it was too hot in the trailer. When it was too cold outside or snowy, it was cold in the trailer. When it was rainy, it was too wet in the trailer. When it was too windy, the trailer shook. We fought nature at every step of the way. And realistically, for a building to be sustainable, it needs to function with the inhabitants and with the ecosystem. It has to be like a living organism, or should I say a living building. So when the building functions as part of the ecosystem, what you now have is you have a system where you're not battling the environment, and you shouldn't have to. Our house is sort of a representation of that, so I'm going to give you a quick snapshot of the house. Our house is, we have rainwater harvesting. Okay, it doesn't sound like a big deal. Some people talk about rainwater harvesting as stormwater management. We look at it as veggie garden management, and it's filtered by our living roof. Okay, a living roof filters the rainwater. There's an interconnection there in how they both work. Our living roof just doesn't filter our rainwater. Our living roof also is it's a habitat for our bees. It's habitat replacement for the area where the house footprint sits. It's also quiet. It's beautiful. And it's fireproof. It's got some advantages there. Ironically, our living roof also works in conjunction with our solar PV system. What can a living roof, how can it impact a solar PV system? Our living roof is less hot. It's cooler. And when it's cooler, it means the PV system actually works more efficiently. So there's a connection between a living roof and the PV system. And then we move on to the solar PV system, which creates our energy. We have a very small 2 kilowatt array that services 6 people. We use a fraction of the power that the average resident uses. I think the average household uses 70, or actually 89% more electricity than we use in our house. We have a grid intertie with BC Hydro, which means that we sell power to BC Hydro. We're actually a net supplier to BC Hydro. From our solar PV system, we can look at our grey water system. Grey water is what comes out of our sinks and our showers, and we use that for our fruits and our vegetables, and our fruit trees and nut trees and our berries. We filter the solids through, and we collect the worm castings, and then we use that in the gardens, and that then makes the veggies that feed us. Moving on from that, we have composting toilets. Now, composting toilets, also very straightforward. We've got a system where we basically take our food in, we compost it when it comes out of us, we then turn around and we put it back in our gardens. It's a cycle. There's an interconnectedness of the systems. Now, how does composting toilets tie to architectural design? Well, we use that compost to grow the climbing tomatoes, to grow the beans that provide our western exposure sunshade to the house. So it's part of our solar design, passive solar design. We have solar thermal tubes on the roof, which I'm sure there's some displays out there today. And we use that to make our hot water that comes out of our taps. We also use it to run hot water through our floors to heat our house. And we've incorporated all this into an earthen architectural building. In our case, it happens to be cob. And I could talk lots about cob, but one of the things about cob in particular is it's got a long lifespan. And JC mentioned that we need to build things that have a longer lifespan. And with cob is basically clay, sand, and straw. Not a lot of embodied energy. It doesn't take a lot of materials. It's local. But talking about embodied energy, JC also talked that we live in a culture where energy mostly comes from oil. Energy equals greenhouse gas emissions right now. Doesn't have to be that way. But in the building environment, CO2 or greenhouse emissions come from three things. The first thing is the habitat destruction of building. So as we remove the ground cover and the trees, we're removing the things that were sequestering carbon in the first place. The next thing that we're doing when we remove all this stuff is we're taking away all the things that were automatically filtering the air and filtering the water. And ironically, we then have to use more energy to replace the things that would normally filter the air and filter the water. So once you get past the site, the impact from the site, and how that impacts greenhouse gas emissions, then you get into the materials of our buildings themselves. Every material, right from the screws I had to put into my sandal this morning to make it down here, the minerals are, they're mined, they're manufactured, they're transported, they're produced into items, and then they're packaged and transported and stored and transported. At each stage of the way, there's energy used. That's embodied energy. All those things have to happen before you can put them into your house. And by reducing that embodied energy, you're reducing the carbon footprint and the greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with building. And building is pretty nasty, actually. Once you get past that, between site and materials, then you look at the operations of the house, and that's when efficiency comes in, and we hear things like R2000. If you can make your house efficient, then you're going to use less greenhouse gases or less energy to actually make that building function. A couple things that we believe that are dear to our heart is that if it's not affordable, it's not sustainable, because for sustainability to occur and for us to go in the direction we need to have a large amount of people that can do it. And if we're stopping people from being able to go out and build homes because it's too expensive, we need to change that. So for us, it's very key. If it's not affordable, it's not sustainable. That leads to one of our little mottos, is that less lifestyle, or less life stuff means more lifestyle. Directly tied to the size of your house and those sorts of things. If you have a very large house, it means you're going to have a higher mortgage. If you've got a big house, it means that you're also likely to put and store more stuff into it, which means you spend more time working to buy stuff and you go into debt. If you can cut down and use only really what you need, then it's going to leave you much more time to spend to do the things that you like. Spend time with kids, spend time in the garden, be artistic, be creative. That's a key, that's quite key. And am I getting there already? Oh, Brandy, that's horrible.
We're coming back to you during the Q&A.
Okay, well, I will leave it there. I was going to talk about code and policy and some other things, so those questions can come up.
And we really need you to talk about code and policy. I'm going to back around is because I think, Gord, you demonstrate so incredibly the passion and the faith to give your life over to something. And that is why I called it jokingly an 11 o'clock service. And I'm pretty sure that each person here could go on for at least another half an hour without me standing up and saying something. So thank you, because there's way more to be said, definitely.